going on in the world. And I think it's never been a better time for us to actually know the peace of God in our heart. For me to know that, I can have God's peace. Like you were sharing before, Paul, about, God's purpose is for His goodness. He's got good things in store for you. And I think we need to have that in our heart. The peace that surpasses mere human understanding, and just to know God in our hearts. So I want to read you some scriptures this morning from Psalm 46, and it says this. It says, God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. It's talking about a time of great chaos and challenge and problems. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble. This is kind of figurative, okay? He's speaking figuratively about a lot of things happening that are causing issues around and problems. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. The nations are in chaos and their kingdoms crumble. God's voice, in the midst of all that, God's voice is thunders and the earth melts. And then it says, in the middle of all of that commotion and chaos, be still and know that I'm God. Just slow down long enough to hear from God. Be still and know that I am God. And friends, knowing God really matters, especially in times like this. Especially when you don't know what the future holds, or there's issues facing your life, and you don't know, haven't got a way through. You don't know where you're going to be, next week or next month or next year. That's when you really need to know the security of God's presence and His plans for your life. And so I was just thinking about this. My earliest memories. My mum. I grew up in a Christian home, right? And my mum was a wonderful Christian lady. She passed away last year, but she used to take us out onto the little back veranda of our little cottage, workers' cottage in Victoria, where I grew up, and take us for Sunday school lessons, because she'd had a life-changing encounter with Jesus, and something had really happened in her heart. And so she would, my older brother and I, she would teach us these Sunday school lessons that she'd got. And before long, she was also instrumental in helping a little ACC church get going in that little town where we were. And so I used to go along there to Sunday school, and I was learning about God, but I hadn't really opened my heart fully to God. But before long, and the Holy Spirit was working in my life, I just opened my life, and I knew, and God came into my heart, and I gave my life to Jesus, and I knew at that moment that I knew God personally. Before that, I knew about God, but now I knew Him. And there's a big difference, friends, because you can know a lot about God. Maybe you've grown up in a Christian home, or maybe you've read the Bible, or maybe you've known about God, but without really opening your heart to Him. Today, you can do that. And you can say, God, I'm coming to you right now. I love that song. God, I'm trusting in your faithfulness. I'm coming to you right now. The song says that we were singing before. You're the same God now as you always were then. And so today, I want to just share with you about this, about knowing God a little bit more. Because one day, friends, there's going to be some revelation will come, or a crisis in your life, or some awakening will come, and you know that you can't wait any longer. You've got to say yes to Jesus and open up your life to Him. So, friends, knowing God is all important. But why does it say, the verse we read before, be still and know God? Why does it say that we should be still so that we can know God? That word be still, in the original Hebrew language that this part of the Bible was written in, it means to sink back in an easy, it's like relaxing back into God's presence, and like a big comfy easy chair at the end of the day, you're just going to sink back and just relax and know God. Because when you put aside all of the stress and the issues of your life and just trusting your life into God's hands, that's when you're going to start to know His presence. Here's some things about why we need to be still so that we can know God. Number one, be still so that you can hear His voice. You can hear the voice of God. And our friends, you all know that life can be pretty frenetic. The pace of life today is really, is full on. And look, Some people love that. Some people like to stay busy and really focused and going flat out, like you said also before, like a lizard drinking. Some people love that, and other people just don't like it at all. But the point, however, whether you like it or not, here's the point. It's not conducive to hearing the voice of God. The frantic, frenetic pace of life we have is not conducive to hearing God's voice in our heart. We got to learn to slow down a little bit. More than ever now, there's so many voices clamoring for our attention. And I was thinking about one of the Old Testament characters, a guy called Job. And Job had a lot of things go wrong in his life. He was a very, very wealthy guy. But all of a sudden, his empire seemed to be collapsing around about him. He had major problems. His family, his children were actually met a catastrophic end and were killed in an accident. And then he lost his health, and all of his things were going wrong, but his life was falling apart, even though he was someone who loved God. How does that work? This guy, I mean, he was he loved God with all of his heart. And yet his world fell apart. And all of Job's friends, by the way, there's a very good end to this story. But I'm not going to get to the end of the story today about that. But all of Job's friends gathered around him to try and figure out what was going on. And they're looking, into Job's life, trying to figure out, what did you do wrong? How have you messed up your life? And they were trying to pin the blame on Job for something he'd done wrong. And they're all old guys, as it turns out. But in the midst in this crowd of people, there was one young guy, a guy called Elihu. And I just love this, what Elihu said. This is Job chapter 32. And it says this. This young guy says, I kept thinking, well, experience will tell. The longer you live, the wiser you become. Is that true? I wish it was true. Because I'm pretty old, right? I really wish that was true. He says, I kept thinking that's the way it is. The longer you live, the wiser you become. Anyone know any? No. I won't. So, but I see I was wrong, because it's God's Spirit in a person, the breath of the Almighty One, that makes wise human insight possible. Now we've got to understand this, folks, that it's not just some accumulation of knowledge over time, but wisdom comes from God. And there's a spirit in me. So if I want to become wise, I need to let God speak into my life. I need to be able to hear from God. I'm thinking of another Old Testament character, a prophet that was so powerful, probably one of the greatest prophets of all time. Can also teach us about hearing from God. And this is a guy called Elijah. And Elijah was, a mighty man of God, did many miracles, but the nation had really turned away from God, and they were worshipping these false gods and like pagan religious practices. And Elijah single-handedly turned the nation back to God. And it was like a cataclysmic event that happened. It was a very difficult day for him, and he called fire down from heaven. And actually, they conducted animal sacrifices, which is what they used to do. And Elijah prayed and said, God, if the God of heaven, I want you to show these people gathered around here that you are real. And it happened. And this fire came down from heaven and consumed this sacrifice. It was a really incredible time, but a very full day. And at the end of it, Elijah was exhausted. And he just went and laid down to sleep. And so this angels came and ministered to him and gave him food and put him on course to his next assignment. And so Elijah ends up in a cave somewhere, and he just needs to hear from God, because he's actually disheartened. Actually, he's discouraged about what's happened, because people, even though he'd done this great thing for God, people still were against him. People were still opposing him and actually trying to take his life. And so Elijah just needed to hear from God. And so he's in the mouth of this. He's in the cave, and God speaks to him and says, "Come out to the mouth of the cave." And it says there that I think it's in 1 Kings chapter 19. It says that there was a great earthquake, and the rocks were broken by the earthquake, but God wasn't in the earthquake. And there was a great wind that blew, and everything was, being flying around, but God wasn't in the wind. Then there was a great fire, but God wasn't in the fire. And after that, it says there was a gentle whisper. And that was the voice of God. That was God speaking to Elijah. And God began to speak to him and just encourage him about what the future would hold and what to do next, and gave him direction that he really needed at that time. See, God wants us to get close to him. And God has an outside voice. He can speak loud when he needs to. But his chosen, what he loves, is the still small voice. So friends, we have got to get used to hearing the still small voice of God. Psalm 107 says this, verse 29, he calmed the storm to a whisper and stilled the waves. He calmed the storm to a whisper and stilled the waves. Here's the second reason why we need to be still if we're going to know God, so that we can learn to stop striving. I just think that word, and it was so relevant this morning, it was definitely a God word, that we've got to learn to stop striving and put our trust in God. And we can learn a lot about how to trust God by looking at how he led the nation of Israel in impossible situations, impossible times. Like God met them out in the middle of the desert. And you might have read this in the book of Exodus yourself from the Bible, how that the nation of Israel ended up, they were in Egypt, and they were all living in Egypt. That's where they kind of started out as a nation, but they became slaves because they grew so quickly. The Egyptians were worried that they were going to take over, and so they became slaves in Egypt. Now, I have to tell you this. Historians don't agree about this. If you want to read secular history, they'll tell you that, the nation, the Israelites were never really in Egypt, or, we're talking about who built the pyramids, okay? Did the Egyptians slaves build the pyramids? Now, the Bible doesn't mention the pyramids, so I'm not telling you that, but it's very clear that they were slaves in Egypt. But historians disagree about this, and they say, some say, they did this, and some say they did that, and we're not sure about this, and we do something else. And in the end, it's like they throw up their hands and say, well, I'm not sure about this anyway, but let's just go with this. I want to tell you, friends, I'm going to go with the Bible, okay? I'm going to go with what the Bible tells us. And it says that they were slaves in Egypt. So I'm very clear about that. So God met them. So what happened is God supernaturally led them out of that slavery, and they were on their way to freedom, away from Egypt, out into their own country. Still being contested today, as you might know, but they're on their way, and they come to the edge of the Red Sea, and all their slave masters are coming after them. They're chasing after them, and here's the nation of Israel. There's 3 million of them, and the Red Sea is in front of them. They can't go anywhere, and behind them is this advancing army. What are they going to do? Let's read it. Exodus chapter 14, Moses says to the people, do not be afraid, stand still and see the salvation of God, which he will accomplish for you today. The Egyptians whom you see today, you'll see again no more forever. And the Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. So friend, there's a time when we've got to be still and wait for God to do something. There's a time for that. It's really, really important. If I'm going to be still, if I'm going to get to know the way God works, there is definitely a time when I've got to learn to be still and wait for God to work. And it's often the hardest thing to do. The hardest thing to do is just to step aside and let God do something. Ask me about that. I'm the sort of person that finds that very hard to do. Personally, ask my wife about that if you want. But the Hebrew word here for salvation, where it says, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. In the original language, that is Yeshua, which ends up being translated and it becomes Jesus. So what it's really saying here is stand still and see Jesus at work in the middle of your situation. What's happening all around you. Let God work in your life and stand still and see him at work in you. So the people of this world cry out and they say things like, Don't just stand there, do something. Have you heard that? Have you said that? Probably. Don't just stand there, do something. And here's the thing, when they stand still, nothing happens. But you are not of this world. Here's the thing, you're a believer in Jesus who laid down his life for you. And that's not a small thing. That's something we should be aware of. That's a very significant thing. He laid down his life for me. I can put my trust in him, and he will fight for you. Even when you can't see your way through. You need a breakthrough in your life, in your finances, in some situation. I was thinking about this just yesterday, and thinking about back in 2021, this church, Lifestream, we were meeting in a little co-working space over in the south side of the city, and we'd been there for a while, but we knew it was temporary, and it was during COVID. COVID was happening, and so we were meeting there in this little building, but the COVID rules changed at the end of 2021, and within a week we had to leave that place. We couldn't stay there because of the way the rules were, and so we found another temporary place. But we were looking for something more permanent where we could go to a permanent building. So, and we looked at quite a lot. I reckon it was more than a dozen built. And I was always looking here, going, getting in the car, ringing up real estate agents. Oh, can we come and have a look at this commercial space, And they were always expensive. It was like $100,000 a year to rent these commercial spaces. That's about what you got to pay for a commercial building. So, that was really out of our price range. But anyway, someone in the church brought this prophetic word. They emailed it to me, actually. Someone that I respected for their ability to hear from God. And so they emailed this to me and said this lady says, the Lord says, don't get ahead of me. I know your heart. Don't get ahead of me. Now, I was thinking about this. It was almost a little bit of a rebuke. And to ask you this morning, does God do that? Does God rebuke people? Yeah. Did I? Yes, I think I did, because I was striving. I was stressing probably to try and find a place, and looking here and there and everywhere. I know your heart, God says, while you continue to reproduce in others what is in your heart, I will take care of the external things, God says, and there will be a miraculous provision of a church building. And I think that's fantastic, and so I did slow down. I definitely slowed down a little bit. But anyway, one day, not long after that, I was driving downtown, and I thought, I'm just going to go past that old building in Neal Street once. I knew about this building because I'd been in here before in previous sort of church generation. So I'm just going to drive past that old building and have another look at it. And the owner, who I happen to know, the previous owner of this place, was standing outside. This is like it was late Friday afternoon, like 6 o'clock Friday afternoon or something. And he was standing out there. So I stopped and had just a big chat to him. He says, come in and have a look, come in. So I walked in, had a look around, and I said, this is got to be it. So he was happy for us to come in, and we leased it cheaply for a few months, and then we're able to actually buy it. And guess what? Our mortgage payments are a lot less than what the rent was going to cost anywhere else. So it was just phenomenal. We can almost afford it, actually, in here. And so it's wonderful. So I tell you, God does that. When you just take time to listen to him, and when you stop striving, that's the point. Stop striving, because God has the answer. And very often the answer that he has is not the one you were thinking of. It's something different. It might be out of left field, or it might be, it might look differently to what you had, but he has the answer for you. So the question is, am I going to stop striving long enough to let God do it for us? So look, I believe, friends, we should do our best in every area of our lives. We should be the best we can, turn up for work early, and do the best you can, and, put your effort into it, put your heart into what you're doing, be the best you can. But know this, that your success and prosperity and blessing doesn't depend on you or the stock market or the property market, because he can bless you in the middle of your wilderness And he can bless you in the presence of your enemies. And I love that thought. So we need to turn our focus away from our own human effort and onto what God wants to pour into our lives. So I know the plans and thoughts that I have for you, says the Lord. Plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And it's so important we get our hearts around that. So number 3, be still. I love this one. Be still, because resting is blessed. It's actually a gift from God. We need to learn how to be still, because resting is blessed. It's a gift from God. So in Genesis chapter 2, verse 3, it says this: God blessed the seventh day. He made it a holy day, which is where we get our word holiday from. It's directly derived from holy day. God blessed the seventh day. He made it a holy day because on that day he rested from his work, all the creating that God had done. Now, this is really significant, folks. I'm not telling you here today that this is a law that you have to keep, but there's an incredibly powerful principle behind this if we can get a hold of today. So here's some things. We know that God didn't rest because he was tired. When God created the world, he wasn't exhausted and worn out, said, I'm had it. I'm out of here. I had to take a break. He wasn't doing that. God wanted to model resting to us because we get tired. Is there anyone here doesn't get tired? It'll be easier if I can ask you if you don't get tired. Oh, I do. We have human limits. And so God wanted to model resting to us because we have limits and we get tired. That's what it was all about. I mean, there's another place in the Psalms where it says that God neither slumbers nor sleeps. Maybe you feel you're a bit like that too. I don't know. But God doesn't sleep. He didn't need to rest after creating the world. He wanted to show us. And he made it holy. Or that word holy means special or set apart for special purposes, which is a wonderful thing. So the first mention of holiness, this is very significant. That Genesis chapter 2 verse 3 is the first mention of holiness in the Bible. And it's attached to the idea of resting. It's connected to rest because God gave it to us as something special and unique, and his blessing is on the concept of rest. So here's the thing. The early Israelites, God said to them, the seventh day of the week, I want you to rest and make it a holy, a special day. And but not only that, the seventh year, every seventh year was also special. And, it was God's promise. There was God's promise of provision for them. Again, this is not a law. I'm not telling you that every seventh year you can't do any work or anything like that. I'm not saying that. But there's something for us to understand about God's heart to bless his people and his provision. So important. Let's have a look at this. Leviticus 25, verse 20. But you might ask, what will we eat during the seventh year? Okay, so they're working for 6 years, and it gets to the seventh year. What are we going to eat during the seventh year, since we are not allowed to plant or harvest crops that year? This is God speaking. He says, be assured that I will send my blessing for you in the sixth year, so the land will produce a crop large enough for 3 years. Now, that's a pretty big crop, large enough for 3 years. And when you plant your fields in the 8th year, you'll still be eating from the large crop of the 6th year. In fact, you'll still be eating from that large crop when the new crop is harvested in the 9th year. So this just shows you that God's capacity, he loves people. He loves you, and he wants to provide for you. He says, I'm going to provide for you. Now, this is one of the hardest things for us to do, folks, is to learn how to rest in God and set time aside for him. And I actually think that the principle of this, though, a lot of people have made a law of this. They've made it a legalistic kind of thing that you must not do this, like the Jewish people. You weren't allowed to. This sounds really weird, okay, how pedantic people can get. You weren't allowed to turn a light switch on. Those electricians here will appreciate this because when you turn the switch on, it might create a spark inside across the contacts of the switch, and that constitutes lighting a fire. and they weren't allowed to light fires on the Sabbath day. Now, how weird is that? But you don't agree. I'm telling you it's weird, okay? They weren't allowed to turn a light switch on. But anyway, so we're not talking about laws here or legalism. We're talking about an underlying principle. I mean, Jesus said the Son of Man himself is Lord or Master of the Sabbath. Sabbath was made to benefit us, not for us to be, a servant of the Sabbath, but for us to be blessed by it and benefited by it. So the easiest thing for us is to depend on our own efforts to success and say things like, I don't have time to slow down to be with God. I don't have time. Or here's the thing, friends. The Jewish people actually get this. They understand this. And I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but Jewish people generally are seriously blessed financially. Like they are some of the wealthiest people in the world, if not the wealthiest people. I haven't got the statistics on that, but they actually control a lot of the world's wealth. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. But I tell you, they are blessed. They are blessed by God, and they understand this principle. And here's a little example here. If you can put that logo up there on the stage. So anyone here who's a camera person, or you're into video or media or cameras, will have seen this logo. This is the logo that comes up any kind of Google search you're ever going to do about cameras. Now, I know nothing about cameras really, but since we do media at the church, I've been sort of learning a bit about it. And every time you go look at something, this always comes up. This is a company from the US called B&H Photo and Video, who is a very successful online marketer of cameras and all that kind of stuff. And so, but there's something unusual about this company that you wouldn't normally associate with a successful online business. And that is they're closed on Saturdays. Like, no, online businesses are open seriously 24 hours a day, mostly, especially, and I know a little bit about this because I actually ran an online business for a while, marketing digital products. And the thing is, I can tell you that the pièce de résistance, or the holy grail of online marketing, is that you can earn money while you're asleep. That's what they say. So if you can set something up that works, it works on its own, you don't have to do anything, and you're making money while you're asleep. That's what they say. So for someone, a very big online business, to shut down on Saturday, if you want to order something from B&H Photo, you've got to do it before 4 o'clock on Friday, because they shut down all of Saturday. And if you look on their website at their hours of operation and when they're open, it lists all the Jewish holidays, because this business, it's owned by an Orthodox Jewish family, and they've been going for about 70 years or something in New York. They've only got one store, one shop, physical shop front, but they have grown to become either the biggest or amongst the biggest online retailers of camera equipment in the world. And they've done it by doing what no one else has ever done, because like I said, if you're an online business, you don't shut down, you're open 100%. And when you go, if you Google it, there's so many complaints of people saying, "Oh, what's wrong with B&H Photo? I want to get stuff and it's Saturday afternoon. I need it desperately, blah, blah, blah." But they don't care. So they're being obedient, and they're prospering so much. They're prospering so well. Anyway, so taking a day to prioritize our relationship with God and setting time aside just to rejuvenate and focus on things that are important, like, worship of God and hearing His word, bringing our gifts to God and celebrating the intimacy we have with Jesus. That's a good idea. It's a really good idea. And, I know, look, there's lots of other stories I could tell, like my father-in-law, who passed away also quite a long time ago, but he had a thing, when Dell was growing up on their farm, had a chinchilla that all the other farmers around would work, if it was harvest time, right? And if you're a grain farmer and there's clouds gathering in the west, or you're someone who makes grain dryers, you know what it's like. You got to get that grain, you got to get it off. You got to get that crop off, because I tell you, if it rains on it, you can lose the whole lot. But he would never, ever harvest on Sunday, ever. Now, I'm not trying to say that Sunday is like a holy day. The Apostle Paul says for some treat one day as special, some treat every day as special. Be convinced in your heart. But the main thing is, be aware of setting time aside to seek God and worship God and let God speak into your life. And he would never do that. He never take a harvest on Sunday. But he was always blessed. They were always blessed in what they did, and God blessed them abundantly in that. So, so this is not about doing nothing. We're talking about taking a day to rest and to hear from God. Not about doing nothing, but it's about making God everything in your life. And so, friends, however you look at it, rest is blessed. I want to ask our creative team to come back to the stage right now. However you look at it, rest is blessed. And friends, you will be blessed if you make that a priority in your life. If you make that a priority. And maybe you're here today and you're one of those people that struggles to slow down. Like, you go on a holiday and you've got to be doing stuff all the time. And if you struggle to slow down, I just encourage you today, get someone to pray with you, to help you in that area. We'll pray with you at the end of this meeting. We're going to actually close this meeting very soon. But why don't we just stand up now? And we're going to sing that through again, that amazing love that welcomes me, the kindness of mercy. God, you are so good. God, you are so good.